A new Washington Post investigation has found that members of Congress steer taxpayer money close to home and close to their own interests. The report examined the records of all 535 members of Congress, tracking their use of earmarks, provisions inserted into spending bills for their home districts. Among the findings, 33 lawmakers spent a combined $300 million on public projects within about 2 miles of properties they own. And 16 members used special spending provisions to give money to groups with connections to immediate family members. Moreover, it's all perfectly legal. We're joined now by one of the reporters who spent a year on the project, Kimberly Kindy of the Washington Post. Kimberly, when you started this, did you think that this was going to prove that members of Congress were feathering their own nests, and did you?
I don't think that I would put it that way. We just knew that there was a big disconnect between members of Congress. They have a lot of power to do things. They can pass laws. They can direct money to earmarks with earmarks, and not a lot is known about their personal financial portfolio. So what we did was we went way beyond the financial disclosure forms they have to file, which frankly don't really reveal very much. And we did a very deep scrub of the existing public records so we could get a very good sense of their financial holdings. And then we started looking at their actions and, looked at the earmarks. And I think that we were surprised to see how many were very, very close to property and how many of them ended up going to programs that, in some cases, their family members run.
Let's talk about two examples. One was Representative Norm Dix, who's from Washington State, and he's a Democrat.
Right.
Tell us about what you found.
Well, in that case, we're talking about a member of Congress and his son who actually worked to create a state agency that then the son was hired to run. And the particular circumstance here is that the member, he became chair of an appropriations committee that gave him the power to direct millions of dollars to the cleanup of a sensitive system of waterways, Puget Sound, in the Washington State area. So his son was in charge of a program to clean up the Puget Sound, and his father sent millions of dollars to that effort. Much of the money ended up going. What we were told by the congressman was that this money was competed. I made sure that it was competitively bid. But when I asked for the records and I kept digging and kept digging and kept digging, what I found was millions of dollars that, sure, it went to the EPA, but it was they were given to them in the form of grants where they were the only applicant, and in one case it was an outright earmark.
Let's go to the other side of the aisle. Representative Hal Rogers from Kentucky also was involved in this?
Yes, he was in the first story that we did, which ran yesterday, that showed how close earmarks come to members of Congress and their property. And in this particular case, you're talking about earmarks that went all around the area where he has a home, all around the area where he owns stock in a bank. And to give you a sense of how close it came to his property, there's the driveway bib. I'm not sure how many people know what a driveway bib is, but you have the sidewalk, and then you have it comes down like that right at the edge of your driveway so you can get out.
Right.
That was repaved with earmarks that he secured. So that's how close it got to his property.
So when you tried to decide, after going through all of these public records pretty exhaustively, how did you decide what the cutoff was about what was too close?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, what we looked at was there were very few that we included unless they were within 2 miles. And so you're talking about dozens and dozens more that had things within 5 miles. We looked at whether or not there was a broad public benefit. We certainly weighed that, but if there was going to be a great benefit to the member because they had a property a few blocks away or they had a property a mile away, they made it into the project. So we looked at proximity, we looked at the broader benefit, and then we looked at how much it might be beneficial to the member. But that judgment call wasn't a big thing. We really were like, the financial disclosure system, it's supposed to show you exactly what a member's assets are. and how that intersects with their finances, and it doesn't.
But well, exactly.
We
Kimberly,
did that.
So you went and you looked in county records, you looked in property records, all public records, and did in finding all this out, did you also discover whether any of these lawmakers went to the ethics committee and said, "Hey, is this okay?"
We did. We asked that question, and the thing that's that's another very revelatory thing that we found out in this process is the rules that they have set for themselves are so lax and permissive. This is perfectly acceptable. They go to them and they ask, "Hey, is this okay?" And they say, "Yeah, it's okay," because under the rules, unless you are a sole beneficiary of an earmark, it's perfectly permissible under the rules. So earmark experts, what they like to say, and there are people who've been studying this, like for a decade. They haven't done a systematic scrub like we've done, but they know how it works. And what they say is that the rules are so lax that you'd have to get an earmark to remodel your kitchen in order to face an ethics charge.
Wow, it would have to be right under your own roof. Kimberly Kindy of the Washington Post, thanks for your work.
Thank you very much for having me.